There is a curious arithmetic in the kingdom of God. Subtraction becomes addition, and emptiness is the one vessel large enough to hold fullness. We spend so many of our days negotiating with circumstances, as if the heart were a merchant counting coins. Yet it is not wealth that makes a man rich, but what cannot be stolen when the doors are broken. Contentment, I have found, is not the sleepy indifference of a sedated soul, nor the stoic's stiff upper lip. It is the lively steadiness of a heart that has anchored its hope beyond the reach of weather. If I am promised the sun itself, and yet must keep it in a paper sack, I shall be poor by noon. But if I am given God, I have that for which suns were merely metaphors. The secret, if it is a secret at all, is that the soul is satisfied when it rests in the source for which it was made. I have sometimes thought that our discontentment is rather like a traveler who mistakes the timetable for the train. We clutch itineraries, purchases, plans, and reputations as if these were the journey itself. They are useful signs, and sometimes lovely ones. But a signpost cannot take you home. Indeed, much of the modern malaise arises from confusing means with ends. Work is a means, pleasure a means. Even virtue, in its lower sense, is a means. Yet we continually promote them to the throne and then wonder why the kingdom falls into riot. When a creature tries to drink from its own reflection, it drowns in shallowness. Contentment begins when we honor the proper hierarchy of loves. God first, everything else by participation. Only then may the sunflowers turn without snapping their stalks. Consider desire. We have in us a hunger that no banquet wholly quiets, a longing that neither success nor companionship can finally resolve. This does not prove that the banquet is bad, only that it is a foretaste, like the smell of bread in a corridor where the feast is kept. Our mistake is to bang our heads against the corridor door and accuse the architecture. If I discover in myself a desire no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is not that I am tragic, but that I am homesick. Contentment is not the extinguishing of desire, but the right seating of it, desire enthroned in God, and thus free to enjoy His gifts without demanding they be God. Now you will say, but life comes with holes in the bucket. Just so. The art is not to seek a bucket without holes, that is impossible for mortals, but to stand under the spring. Circumstances leak. God wells up. The contented man is not one who has collected enough stoppers for every fissure. He is the one who has moved his bucket under the fountain. Gratitude performs this relocation. We do not become content by multiplying possessions, but by magnifying praise. Gratitude takes what is small and shows it to be sacramental. It takes bread and finds blessing. It takes Monday and finds mercy. The greedy soul says, "When I have more, I shall give thanks." The grateful soul discovers that thanksgiving is the seed of more clarity, more joy, more freedom, though not necessarily more things. There is also the matter of comparison, that subtle thief who leaves us poorer even in plenty. We compare our behind the scenes with another's portrait and call it justice. But contentment cannot grow in the greenhouse of comparisons. The glass distorts both our neighbor and ourselves. God has given me not an abstract life, but this particular one, with these parents, this body, this time in history, this work, these capacities and defects. Contentment is to say, this is the field He has assigned me to tend. Let me bring it to fruit. The farmer does not envy the sailor's winds. He learns his seasons, the texture of his soil, the patience of rain. When we refuse our lot, we become connoisseurs of emptiness, very refined in disappointment, very clever at misery. When we receive it from the hand of God, the ordinary rises to the dignity of offering. We must also speak of suffering, for contentment that only sings in June is hardly Christian. To be content in Christ is not to call bitter sweet, nor to nod politely at injustice. It is, rather, to know that the valley is a passage and that the dark has a master. There is a kind of peace one gains only by walking with pain long enough to learn its language. Even grief, when given to God, becomes a strange midwife of hope. The Almighty does not waste wounds. He stitches them into the pattern of our becoming until, if we will let Him, the scar itself begins to witness to a deeper healing. We are not promised exemption from storms, but we are promised a keel that holds. Contentment, then, is courage tethered to providence. Some will object that such talk is a pious luxury. They will point to accounts due, duties pressing, the small cruelties of the day. Yet the secret of contentment does not bypass these. It baptizes them. The test of our philosophy is not the lecture hall, but the laundry, the desk, the sick bed, the late train, the awkward conversation. If God is God, then He is God of Tuesday afternoon. And if He is not Lord there, He is not Lord anywhere. To practice contentment is to practice presence. To meet God not only in cathedral light, but in the dust motes of one's own room. To discover that every place may become a chapel if the heart kneels. How then does one learn this holy arithmetic? We learn it as children learn music, by scales, by daily exercises, until what was practice becomes second nature, and what was duty blooms into delight. Make then a habit of thanksgiving. Name 3 mercies before your breakfast cools. Make, too, a habit of relinquishment. Give something away each week that you might have kept, if only to remind your fingers that they are servants, not masters. Fast from the little indulgences that colonize the will. Feast, in turn, upon the word that frees it. Seek the company of the poor, not to be noble, but to be taught. The poor know, more readily than the sated, how to receive. And pray, not to inform God, who knows, nor to flatter Him, who needs nothing, but to enlarge your soul, which can hold more joy than you yet suspect. Contentment is not the end of longing, but its sanctification. The pilgrim does not cease to walk because he has seen the mountain. He walks truer. The more God is our treasure, the more daringly we may enjoy His gifts, for we no longer demand of them what they cannot give. We may taste the apple without fearing the winter. We may love the friend without worshipping him. We may use the work without becoming its slave. And when loss comes, as it must, we may grieve without despair, because what is deepest in us is not at risk. The heart at rest in God is like a harbor that can welcome ships and release them again, for the tide that keeps it full is not the ships themselves, but the moon that moves the sea. If you ask me, finally, what contentment feels like, I should say it is the quiet surprise of finding again and again that God is enough, and that when He is enough, everything else becomes gift rather than God, music rather than master, signpost rather than destination. It is to live in the light of a coming morning so certain that even the shadows learn to serve it. It is to be rich with a richness that will follow you through the only door all of us must one day pass. And it is, in the end, to discover that having Him we have, not less of the world, but more of its meaning. There is, in every human heart, a restless bird beating its wings against the bars of the cage. Even when the seed is plentiful, even when the sunbeam falls kindly upon the feathers, it flutters, convinced that there must be some greater sky. This is not altogether wrong. We are creatures meant for open heavens, not cages. The problem arises when we confuse the cage for the sky, or the sky for the cage. Contentment does not mean silencing the bird, nor clipping its wings, but teaching it to sing while it waits for the window to be opened. To be content in God is to know that the sky is real and that the keeper of the cage has not forgotten. What then is the relation between desire and discipline? Discipline alone, without delight, becomes grim moral bookkeeping, a sort of spiritual taxation. Delight alone, without discipline, dissolves into self-indulgence. Contentment holds them together like the strings of a violin tightened just enough to make music. Too loose and there is no sound. Too taut and the string will snap. In the same way, the toll held by God is tuned, capable of joy, capable of endurance, capable of harmony. And yet, we often live as if contentment were some rare jewel buried deep in hidden minds and reserved for saints alone. But I believe it is offered to every Christian as daily bread. The secret lies not in dramatic revelations, but in the slow schooling of the soul. A mother who sings while washing dishes is nearer to it than a philosopher who grumbles in his study. The humble task, done with gratitude, is a ladder rung toward heaven. The weary man who whispers, "Thy will be done," in the dark, has already stepped into riches that emperors cannot purchase. It is also worth noticing how strangely portable contentment is. The Apostle Paul could carry it into prison, and it shone more brightly against the iron bars than it might have in the open fields. The martyrs carried it into arenas. The sick carried it into narrow beds. The exiled carried it across seas. If contentment depended on circumstance, it would never have survived such weather. Its very endurance is proof that it grows not from soil, but from the root above all soil. It is a light that does not borrow from the sun. But here lies a paradox. The more we grip our contentment as if it were a personal prize, the quicker it slips away. It cannot be hoarded. It must be shared. The contented soul becomes generous by nature, for it has nothing to fear in giving. Love multiplies when it is spent, and peace deepens when it is offered. The miser may clutch gold, but grows poorer in spirit each day. The saint may give away bread and grows richer in eternity. Thus contentment, far from being a selfish retreat, is an outgoing current that blesses others precisely because its source cannot be exhausted. When the final hour comes, and our hands must unclench from every possession, every plan, every role, the only true wealth will be God Himself. If we have learned contentment in Him, then death will not strip us naked, but clothe us at last. For the Christian, the grave is not the end of contentment, but its consummation. What we have practiced in part, we shall possess in fullness. Then the bird will not merely sing in the cage, it will soar. There is in contentment a strange mingling of joy and humility. The man who has found his rest in God is not strutting about as if he had solved the riddle of life. On the contrary, he knows more than most that he has solved nothing, only that he has been found. Pride cannot coexist with contentment, for pride forever whispers, "You deserve more." Contentment, like a child asleep in its father's arms, whispers instead, "What I have been given is enough, for He is enough." It is this posture that frees us from the tyranny of entitlement. The proud soul is forever hungry, and hunger makes one restless, but the humble soul, receiving daily manna, eats with thanksgiving and does not hoard. I sometimes picture the difference like two men gazing at the same meadow. One counts the weeds, calculating what he lacks. The other sees the buttercups and marvels that such beauty is offered without fee. Both are in the same field, but one is imprisoned, the other is free. So it is with our lives. If I fix my eyes only on what I do not have, then no palace will ever satisfy me. But if I learn to see the mercy in the smallest gift, the laughter of a child, the return of spring, the steadfastness of a friend, then I have entered into the secret chambers of abundance. For the world itself becomes charged with sacrament when received in gratitude. And what of time, that most elusive of gifts? We spend our hours either regretting the past or borrowing anxieties from the future, while the present slips through our fingers like sand. Yet contentment dwells in the present tense. It is here that God meets us, not yesterday when the mistake was made, nor tomorrow when the fear imagines itself fulfilled. The Eternal One is always in the now, and so to be content is to stand where He stands. We cannot change the past, we cannot command the future. But we can meet God in this moment, and that meeting is enough to redeem both past and future by His grace. It may help to think of contentment as a kind of inward music. The world plays its discordant notes, some sharp with pain, some flat with monotony, some clashing with cruelty. Yet the soul in God hears, beneath the surface, a deeper melody, the theme of redemption that runs through every bar. Contentment is not deafness to the noise. It is hearing the harmony that the composer has woven into it all. And sometimes, when faith grows strong, one may even join the harmony, singing through tears, praising through perplexity, believing through loss. This is not natural. It is supernatural. It is the life of Christ within us. Indeed, contentment is not a human invention. Left to ourselves, we would always be restless, always suspicious that we were cheated. But Christ, who emptied himself, who had nowhere to lay his head, who bore the scorn of men and the silence of heaven, shows us what it means to be rich toward God. He is content not because the cross was easy, but because the Father was enough. If his Spirit dwells in us, then he teaches our hearts to echo the same truth. Thus we see that contentment is no passive resignation. It is a warrior's strength disguised as a child's trust. It faces the world with open hands, saying, "Take what you will, give what you will. My treasure is secure, my hope unshaken, my joy unstealable." The contented man may lose all, yet he has lost nothing. For what he truly possesses lies in the hands of one who never loses. And so I urge you, as I urge myself, practice the secret day by day. Begin in small things. Thank him for the breath you now draw. Thank him for the mind that can even form such thanks. Thank him for the hope that outlasts the grave. And as you do, you will find the arithmetic of heaven at work. Subtraction becoming addition, loss becoming gain, emptiness becoming fullness. You will find, to your astonishment, that you have everything, because you have him. Contentment, you see, is not an escape from longing, but the right ordering of it. We are pilgrims, and pilgrims long for home. The tragedy of the human heart is not that it desires too much, but that it desires too little, fastening itself on trinkets when it was made for treasure. The man who drinks salt water is not condemned for thirsting, but for seeking his satisfaction in the wrong fountain. When the soul is wed to God, longing is not abolished. It is transfigured. Our yearning becomes like a compass, always pointing north, always reminding us that this world, even at its best, is not enough. You will find, then, that the most contented saints were often those who suffered greatly. Their secret was not a shallow cheerfulness, but a profound trust. They had discovered that joy is not fragile when it rests upon the eternal. A flower with shallow roots withers when the sun grows hot, but a tree planted by the river endures both drought and storm. Contentment is this rootedness. It does not deny the pain of the hour, but it sees that pain against the backdrop of God's everlasting arms. We might think of contentment as a rehearsal for heaven. Even now, we practice tuning our hearts to the key of eternity. When we learn to thank him for a crust of bread, we are already learning to thank him for the bread of life. When we learn to rejoice in the light of a candle, we are training our eyes for the day when no sun or lamp will be needed, for the Lord himself will be our light. Every act of gratitude, every moment of surrender, is a step toward that final country where contentment will be no secret but the very atmosphere. And mark this well, contentment is contagious. The man or woman who has found peace in God becomes, without knowing it, a quiet sermon. Their calmness in trial, their generosity in want, their joy in little things preaches more convincingly than volumes of argument. Others will ask, "What sustains you?" And the answer, though simple, is inexhaustible. I have God, and that is enough. So let us not think of contentment as some delicate flower that blooms only in cloisters or on mountain tops. It may be planted in kitchens, workshops, offices, and city streets. Wherever a heart turns its gaze toward God and whispers, "Thy will be done," there the seed takes root. And though weeds may grow about it, and storms may beat upon it, still it will rise, quietly, steadily, until the fragrance of heaven itself begins to cling to the life. One day, when all journeys are ended and the great doors of eternity are opened, we shall see what contentment truly was. We shall look back and find that every small act of trust, every whispered prayer of gratitude, every moment of surrender was being woven into a tapestry of glory beyond all imagining. Then we shall not merely say, "I am content," but rather, "I am complete." For contentment is not an end in itself. It is the beginning of joy unending, the threshold of heaven, the echo of a harmony that will one day fill the universe. If you trace the thread of contentment to its source, you will find it is woven into the very being of God. The Almighty does not create out of lack, as though he were lonely or poor in himself. He creates out of fullness, an overflowing of love too rich to remain solitary. In him there is no envy, no restlessness, no shadow of want, and when we rest in him, we are drawn into that same divine sufficiency. It is not that we become gods, but that our hearts are taught to breathe in rhythm with his. To be content is, in some sense, to begin participating in the eternal serenity of God himself. Notice how this differs from the world's counterfeit versions. The world offers contentment through distraction, one more purchase, one more achievement, one more indulgence. But each one more becomes never enough. It is like painting the bars of a prison and pretending it is freedom. True contentment is not painted gold. It is liberty itself. It frees us to hold possessions without being possessed by them, to enjoy blessings without fearing their loss, to meet trials without collapsing beneath their weight. Think of the sea. Its surface may roar with storms, but in its depths there is calm. The life of contentment is not a denial of surface storms, but a dwelling in the depths where peace abides. Christ himself is that depth. If he lives within you, then no matter the tempests above, there remains a stillness that cannot be shattered. This is why saints in dungeons have sung, and martyrs at the stake have found courage. Their peace was not borrowed from circumstance, but anchored in eternity. And what then of our ordinary days? For most of us are not called to dungeons or flames, but to traffic jams, small disappointments, unpaid bills, and unremarkable routines. Yet here too contentment shines. It sanctifies the trivial. The humblest task, performed with a heart at rest in God, becomes radiant with meaning. Washing a floor, tending a garden, balancing an account, all may become hymns if the soul is tuned. The quiet Christian, unknown to the world, may live a life of such hidden contentment that heaven itself resounds with their worship. Do not mistake me. Contentment is not the end of effort. It does not forbid ambition rightly ordered. It is not laziness, nor apathy, nor the abandonment of responsibility. Rather, it is the spirit in which all effort is offered. We strive, not as slaves frantically earning our worth, but as children secure in their Father's love. Ambition that grows out of rest in God is sanctified. Ambition that grows out of hunger for self is poisoned. The difference is subtle, but it makes all the difference. And at last, we come to the eternal horizon. For the contentment we taste here is but a shadow of what is to come. We are promised a day when longing and fulfillment will at last coincide, when desire will not be extinguished but crowned. Heaven is not the death of joy, but its wedding. In that place we shall not be haunted by the fear of loss, nor gnawed by envy, nor wearied by striving. We shall drink deeply of the fountain himself and find that all our scattered thirsts were tributaries leading to that one spring. Until that day, to practice contentment is to live prophetically. It is to declare to a restless world that God is enough, even now, even here, even in me. And to live that declaration is itself a form of worship, as pleasing to the Father as any song sung in stained glass halls. There is a peculiar strength in contentment that the world mistakes for weakness. To be satisfied in God does not mean we are easily pleased with injustice or passive in the face of evil. On the contrary, contentment gives the soul a vantage point from which to resist evil without becoming its prisoner. The discontented man fights from desperation, gnawed by envy, consumed with fear of loss. But the contented man fights from abundance, knowing that even defeat cannot rob him of his true treasure. He is free to act with courage, because he has nothing left to lose. This is why the meek, whom Christ blesses, are not cowards, but warriors of another sort. Their strength is not the brittle strength of pride, but the quiet, enduring strength of trust. Contentment teaches the hands to hold loosely what the world clutches tightly, and loose hands are free hands, free to serve, free to give, free to build, free even to suffer, if suffering becomes the price of love. It is also the soil in which joy takes root. For joy cannot thrive in a heart always muttering, if only. If only I had more money, if only I had better health, if only I were younger, if only others admired me. The litany of if-onlys is a dirge, a funeral song for the present moment. But contentment transforms if-only into already. Already I am loved by the eternal. Already I am forgiven. Already I am held. These certainties are immovable, and joy springs from them like water from a hidden aquifer. Yet one must be honest. Contentment is not always a feeling. It is often an act of faith. Feelings rise and fall like the tide, but faith is the anchor. To be content is sometimes to stand in the night and say, God is enough, even when every nerve in the body cries otherwise. Such declarations are not lies. They are rehearsals of the truth until the heart believes it again. And in time, the rehearsal becomes reality. The act becomes habit. The habit becomes nature. Let us not miss that contentment is learned, not inherited. Paul himself wrote, I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. He learned it through want, through hunger, through imprisonment, through the long school of suffering. So too must we learn. God's classroom may be poverty for one, loneliness for another, obscurity for a third. The lessons vary, but the teacher is the same, and the goal is always this: to free the soul from slavery to circumstance and tether it to himself. And here lies the final wonder. The practice of contentment on earth is the beginning of heaven's music. We will not suddenly become new creatures at the gates of glory. Rather, what God has been shaping in us here will blossom there. The gratitude we practice now will become the song of eternity. The surrender we learn here will become our everlasting freedom. The peace we cling to in storms will become the calm sea of heaven's shore. Contentment is rehearsal, and the performance awaits. So when next you find your heart restless, when envy creeps, when fear prowls, pause and remember. The secret of contentment is not to possess all things, but to be possessed by the one who made all things. To have him is to have enough. To rest in him is to be at home already, even while the journey continues, and to share him is to multiply the riches of eternity. If I have spoken of contentment, it has not been to suggest a tidy solution to all human sorrows, nor to imply that the Christian life is free from wounds. Rather, it is to point toward a secret not of escape but of endurance, not of resignation but of resurrection. Contentment is not the denial of our needs. It is the discovery that all our needs are gathered into the infinite sufficiency of God. To live in this secret is to know that even when the vessel cracks, the treasure remains, and even when the road bends, the destination does not vanish. I think often of the pilgrim image. We are all, whether we admit it or not, on a journey across a land of shadows. Some chase mirages, convinced that if they reach that shimmering pool, they will finally be satisfied. Yet when they arrive, the sand is as dry as ever. Others wander endlessly, weighed down with possessions, yet thirsty still. But the true pilgrim, the one who has learned contentment, knows that the mirage is not the enemy, only the sign that he was meant for another country. He presses forward, not because the desert is pleasant, but because he trusts there is a spring beyond the ridge. Contentment is the art of walking steadily, neither frantic with greed nor paralyzed by fear. It allows us to look upon our neighbor without envy, to look upon our work without slavery, to look upon our trials without despair. It teaches us to see gifts as gifts, not gods, and losses as teachers, not tyrants. Most of all, it lifts our eyes to Christ, who is himself the secret. For he is the bread that satisfies, the water that quenches, the shepherd who guides, the home to which we return. And in the end, contentment is not something we shall practice forever. One day we shall not need to say, God is enough, for we shall see him face to face and know without doubt that he is more than enough. Desire and fulfillment shall at last embrace. Longing and arrival shall be one, and every restless sigh shall turn to song. The bird will not sing in the cage. It will soar in the eternal sky. That is the destiny for which we are made. Until then, we rehearse heaven by trusting, thanking, surrendering, and resting in him. So, my dear friends, if you take anything from these reflections, let it be this. The secret of contentment is not in having all things, but in belonging wholly to the one who holds all things. To find him is to find home already. To rest in him is to possess riches that cannot rust, treasures that cannot be stolen, joy that cannot be extinguished. And now, if this meditation has stirred something in you, I ask you to carry it further. Share it with those who hunger for peace. Leave your thoughts, your questions, your reflections. And if you have found this journey worthwhile, I invite you to like, to comment, to share, and to subscribe, that together we may keep exploring the riches of faith and the mysteries of God's love. May the peace of Christ, which surpasses all understanding, guard your hearts and minds, and may you discover day by day that in having him, you truly have everything.